Podcast 10. So we now understand how the numbers are played, and we can say whatever is within the configuration that fits mathematical properties, the mathematical, allegorical, and symbolic representation of the forces of reality, where we have the dot, we have the line, we have the triangle, we have the cube or the square, we have the pentagram, and we have the hexagram, and onward and so forth. These are different forces of reality, and we can call them the dimensions of reality. Then we have the sticks. And I want to put a little bit further than that, because the first stick, where we draw the line from above to below, that is where we begin the journey to reconnect to our higher order awareness. And that is technically the first strand of our true consciousness potentials. So the sticks that are put together are then a symbolic representation of the remembering and reintegration of our original consciousness potentials, hence as sticks or strands. Then you have the second strand that is still also on its own as a horizontal line. That is the inner outer that goes through the heart. So with that, once we combine these two and they begin to work together, then we have, of course, 4 levels of awareness that begins to teach us how to truly operate with the abilities of the higher order awareness that goes with the true architecture, a holographic representation of our reality, which is the 4th dimensional network. But then, what about the 3 sticks? The 3 strands that comes with the 3rd dimension, so to speak, that comes with the beingness of man, that turns us into a living creature as part of a form that can be seen as a trinity that's either upright or downright, that is either a cup or a man with his feet on the ground and thereby have no arms to reach out for what is truly important, but are all focused on the matter reality that is touchable with the feet, because the hands are connected to the heart. So what we reach out for with the heart should be what we can embrace and what we can take to heart and what can transform into some level of kindness and energetic reciprocity that leads to a higher exchange rate, rather than actually something where we take with our hands and turn manifest things into other forms of manifest things. That's part of the male curse, that they have lost the ability to truly transform with their hands and be the kind, soft hands that instigates the changes in another person with a kind touch, which females still have, but mostly are just used for their offspring and other living creatures that are seen as lesser or something that needs protection, as a subtle remembering of the female that is actually capable of protecting, but are protecting things that are more fragile, and in that is not really recognizing her true power. Again, we can go on and on and on and on. The last thing I want to put here in the 6th stick or the hexagon is the understanding, or the hexagram is the understanding of the upright and downright triangle as they meet up, where the man with the feet on the ground and the cup meets in together and become a wholesome being, a unified being, where the male and female are unified once again, because the 2 triangles can also symbolize male and female, where the matter is then reunited with spirit, and on and on and on. And that's the 6-stranded level, where we reach the ability to complete the 612 pillars. So let's say that number 1 is the completion of pillar 17, number 2 is the completion of pillar 28, number 3 is the completion of 39, and the cross, or number 4, is the completion of the 410 pillar, and number 5 in the true understanding is the completion of the 511 pillar. And this can be symbolized in the different levels, the different sticks that are put together, because these are technically representation of the strands that we are activating. And as we look at these symbolic representations, we are then also understanding that they too must become flexible and change into something entirely else. With that, I would now like to move into the way that I have interpreted these things in a more up-to-date type of version of these ancient dynamics that has been part of all secret teaching systems throughout times since the fall of Atlantis and the reseeding that took place some 25,000 years ago. You remember from the template sciences and the understanding how I put them into a trinity structure there, where the 12 natural laws of energy utilization became part of the rules and the principles. And they are technically to be seen in cohesion with these two other forces and dynamics. But here for once, since we're now working with co-creation and the natural laws of energy utilization as reality on its own, we understand that the natural laws of energy, I'm reading from the text, which you can find as part of the template sciences or as part of the whole philosophy book. The natural laws of energy determine if the energies we utilize in our energy system will lead to progression or regression. When the energies are utilized correctly, we are allowed to reconnect to the reality holographic grids, here the subsidiary timeline. And more energy will flow into our energy system via the base field and the organic holographic grid structure in the density 2, and that's dimension 4, 5, and 6. When utilized wrongly, the grids close down step by step until there's nothing left but regression and distortion. When it comes to the subsidiary timeline, these dynamics apply as well. And we, as we talked about in podcast 7 or 8, I think it's podcast 7, where if we don't do that, we get into a quarantine zone where we can then recorrect. And if we don't know how to recorrect, then we'll be pushed out the other side of the door, and that's it. The 12 laws of natural energy utilization are 1, the law of energetic influence. 2, the law of proximity and counterbalance. 3, the law of creational projection and amplification. 4, the law of correct feedback and reciprocity. 5, the law of higher and lower order sciences. 6, the law of the cycles. 7, the law of cause and effect. 8, the law of correct function and correct use of energy. 9, the law of correct purpose and correct use of genetics. 10, the law of correct hierarchy and emplacement. 11, the law of correct use of technology, and 12, the law of continuation and cyclic renewal. And as I also said in the text material, this needs to be contemplated upon before you get any answers of what that actually could or could not be. So for the sake of giving you the chance to contemplate on these 12 natural laws of utilization, I will then go into a different understanding of them instead of explaining, this is what it means, because you need to figure out what that means to you. Because the way the 12 laws represent themselves are in alignment with your consciousness potentials. So that means the first level that you put into the 12 laws, see them as a 12-stranded experience that you are to understand to its fullest details to activate with the 12 levels of your consciousness potentials that works with reality energies. And that means the reality energies are the ones that's part of the holographic-energetic network, the code streams, and the information systems that there teaches you how to exemplify and co-create with the original principles that are rooted into the subsidiary timeline that will lead to a continuation of advanced civilization as they correctly transform and utilize the energies of their reality field. When we look at our world, we are looking at the reality field energies that are there. We're looking out the window, that's the reality field energies. And you're not thinking much about how you're utilizing them. You're just going about your everyday and not really noticing the space you're part of. You're rarely contemplating on that you are actually standing on a quote-unquote planet that is not really a tangible planet, but a planet composed of different forms of forces that are in that balance that gives you the experience of being in a reality that is manifested as part of a quote-unquote planet. You know it's a planet because you have seen it from outer space. But if you really look at the pictures from what is taken, you can see there are different lines of energy that is just the manifested, the crystalline version that holds 4 elements together in a balance that gives the illusion of a planet. When we work within different forms of technologies, as science do, they are then dividing the planetary energies into smaller and smaller units until they just become waves, and from that turns into probabilities and possibilities. And that's all it is, possibilities and probabilities. This planet, as you see, as tangible and physical, and you can touch and feel and whatnot, and smell and taste and all of these things, they're just possibilities that have been developed somewhere down the line within different groups of humanity that have discovered the different senses that they have contacted, so to speak, the reality units with, and in that way have changed reality into what it is today. We are the sole co-creator of our reality field. Of course, we are within limited programs that changes or controls our ability to perceive reality as part of the limited sight that we have that goes within the visual spectrum. Everything else is not observed by the brain and the neural network. So in that way, we are not perceiving extreme levels of our reality. We're a very limited spectrum of reality within the spectrum of light. When everything is turned dark, we can't see anything, right? So it's when the sun is shining, then, or we put light on, then we're capable of seeing things. If we put light on, as now when it's turned into LED, that's also within a specific spectrum of energy that allows us to view in the dark, compared to if we are looking through a flame, that will then allow us to look into other levels of reality within a different set of spectra. So we understand that the sources we're using to see things, to transform darkness into visible things that we can see, must have some kind of tool, something that assists us or aid us in that process. Be it the sun, the stars, the moon that's reflecting the energies of the sun, a flame or a light bulb, we are still in need of these different forms of energies that are assisted by the wavelength possibilities of this reality field. Then we have the particles that clusters together in different forms of untangible little orbs of energy units that has such a vast distance in between them that they are more composed of emptiness than anything else. These are technically the foundational building blocks of the crystalline pattern. So what holds it together are the architecture behind. Because if we're looking at reality as it is, as this weird spectrum of waves that are fluctuating and oscillate in different frequencies, and by that create different colors, and we have sound waves that are doing the different sounds, and then we have the particles that are giving the illusion of actual manifest reality. But it's only manifest because it has the fourth dimensional pattern behind it. If that wasn't there, there would be no cohesion between the energy units. So the holographic-energetic architecture behind our reality is upholding reality, and that's why I'm saying that as the reality programs break down, then the cohesion and the assembling of these different waves and particles will no longer keep off their original pattern as part of the old world order, but will change into different kind of aspects that are more and more imbued with other dimensional energies as it rightfully should be so. Unfortunately, due to different groups on our planet, they're trying to link that up to the types of dimensional energy we had in the previous universal cycles. And that's the people that are moving backwards, trying to uphold what was manifested and came into be with the timeline event energies and then feed it into the previous universal cycles. We could say at large, most of the humanoids are on that path of reuniting with what once were and not what could become. The progressive races are more oriented of transforming the past so that something new can blossom. We're utilizing the energies of the reality field into progression, where consciousness can blossom and turn into what we understand as life force. I've talked about that in the previous course material, but life force is the next foundation of the upcoming cycles, where energy and consciousness are united into what we understand as life force. And that's where 333 becomes a 9. And then that is unified in a new type of symbol that's no longer a hexagram of consciousness and energy, but becomes a 9-pointed star, or an enneagram actually, where the 9 levels, the 3 trinities, are united into a new type of being that as its core foundation has the 6th dimension as the lowest point between manifestation, and then adds in another layer of another 3 types 3 layers of energy that leads to the completion in the 12th cycle, which then leads to the continuation into other realms. It's not that important to go there. I can barely see it myself. This is just a faint memory that can be activated by the use of these symbols. And that's what that technology, the use of symbols, is for, to ignite different unspoken levels of our abilities to understand energy and consciousness. When we use a symbol, we are comprising the energy units into a specific pattern. If you're looking at some of the extraterrestrial crafts and some of the technologies that are left from them and some of the ancient types of scriptures, they are using symbols in that manner to express different forms of energy or forces that energy can show us. It's all about what does the energy units show us. These are the forces and these are part of the code sequences. So you have the holographic energetic network behind all reality that creates cohesion. If there is not this coherence or cohesion, then everything will fall apart. So that's the order. The order of the different dimension is that it's gathered together into different sectors that holds different patterns that we understand as a foundational pattern of that type of reality or that type of dimension that gives it that specific type of feature. Within these realities, there are dynamics. These are the code sequences. The code streams are the individual lines of the holographic grid that allows for specific pathways of transition and transformational dynamics until we have learned everything that is on that code stream, aka timeline, and then we transcend it. So that's how it goes. We are stepping into a code stream, aka a timeline, so we can transform it. And then once we have learned to transform it as an inner outer and it becomes in alignment with who we and what we truly are, we begin to transmute it. And as we transmute it either into elevation or decomposition, we are then eventually gone through all of the steps where everything that we will take with us from that code stream or that timeline will have been transmuted into something that is building a larger bridge or a thicker bridge or a more consistent bridge between our lower order field and our higher order fields. That's what transmutation is all about. Once we have built the bridge and we are then becoming the cup, then we transcend and then we are moving beyond that timeline and stepping into another code stream where we continue our journey, where we learn of the true forces and the true realities and how things are really put together, the true nature of everything there truly is. And that's not saying the same as the truth, but that's just what we could say, the nature of things as they are in coherence with our consciousness potential. That will always be the truth, hence the relative reality. We then understand that within the code streams, there are code sequences. These are the information patterns that are giving specific properties to the pattern itself. So the code streams are kind of straight lines, if you like, a grid work that's kind of straight lines. You can make them curved, if you like. You can make it all sorts, all depending on what dimension they are in. If they're in the 4th dimension, they are curved like a matrix or crisscrossing. When you go into the 5th, they turn into this 5th dimensional pattern I talked about in the previous podcast, where there are 5 rings within each other that begins to overlap each other and create different sectors that are then unfolding 5 aspects of reality within 5-dimensional dynamics that allows for 5-dimensional reality fields. These are typically the systemic or the stellar civilizations. The planetaries are more aligned with the 4th dimensional configuration or the true, what we say, middle domain, more organic versions of reality where life forms take more organic representations as part of the Trinity structure, where it is a shape that is there to either regress and be pushed out of reality or to elevate through transformational and transmutation processes. Again, the Trinity between transformation, transmutation, and transcendence. That's the Trinity structure of the dynamics of the upright triangle, which are, again, the triangle of reality dynamics, whereas the 3 sticks are the 3 strands of the consciousness potentials of the 3-9 pillar that will then be completed by working through the 7 dimensions of the 3-9 pillar. That's a lot of numbers and that's a lot of confusion, but that's part of the abstract level of understanding. You see, these dynamics are impossible to put into words, but you can show them via symbols and explanation of these symbols, or image representation as we see it in the tarot cards, or any other tool that will show to some degree what that force is all about. Similar like fire, which is inaccurate, it's actually heat, but that's part of the transformation where something transforms into something else, heat is generated. And fluidity, which is currents. This is kind of the code streams that are running as part of our reality field. So the basic level of our reality field is not quote unquote water, but it is the fluidity of the holographic 4th dimensional network. And then you have fire, the transformational forces that are part of the quote-unquote flame layers or light language that are the code streams that are part of that reality. Now we're beginning to tie the 4 elements into the higher order sciences. Then you have things that are moving or are being kind of, we could say, when things are transformed, they change from one state into another, but they're technically still a version of itself in that state. When you transmute it, you're lifting it or degrading it into something entirely else beyond the 3 aspects of what it is. It then becomes a balance point in between the opposition or the polarity, and then it becomes something entirely else. The transmutation processes could be associated with wind or air that moves things from one position to another. It can elevate it or it can push it over the cliff, so to speak. So that's another representation of transmutation. So we can say that transformation is heat, transformation is heat, transmutation is air, and then you have the transcendence that goes with the higher levels of air. So we kind of go from heat into air. And if you look at the flame, you will see it has both aspects. And this is where observing reality and all of its interesting features comes into the understanding of, okay, now we begin to see how these things are playing in as the lesser version within our reality field. Of course, the crystalline patterns we already talked about, they are not of much interest when it comes to the understanding of the physical reality as things are today, because we don't have access to some of the original dynamics that gave us the ability to work with physical matter. Today, we can only take one state of physical matter and give it another shape, technically, unless we burn it or destroy it, as we talked about. And that's not really transformation, unless it's something that needs to not be present anymore, and hence it's a good idea to burn it, and by that turn it into dust, and with that actually turn it into something that can give some kind of sustenance to Earth itself as part of what we call soil enhancing tool. Sorry, I forgot the word there. Okay, fertilizer. Instead of letting it decay and rot, which leads to more decay and rot in the soil, which is not of use, because that allows for a lot of underworld critters to sustain themselves and continue to eat. Whereas if you have ashes from wildfire or things that are burned, that is actually with a larger degree of what we call fertilization possibilities, from where they can grow new, more purified types of existences or greens or plants and whatnot. Okay, so with that, we had the fluidity, we had the fire, we had the air, and we had the crystalline. So we are understanding these are forces that are part of the original type of energy that our reality field is composed of. I strongly suggest that you're contemplating on the 4 elements and asking to get what are the 4 elements in terms of the higher order sciences, and then get the true knowledge and understanding how they're represented inside our reality. Of course, we can say that I'm not going to shut it down by saying we can't, but I think it would be wholesome and from the right perspective and true use of power to let unfold what our capacities are, and not yearning or have a desire for being able to do these transformational processes in terms of what we want them to be more than what actually is possible. It's always a balance point between what we have and what we want. And we must see in terms of we have this and that must manifest itself first. When we are in full understanding, have gone through the 3 initiations and have become the cup of our higher order awareness that then descends into our brain, and by that is activated by the vibrational levels of our heart, and we become the true representation of a little demigod, if you want to put it that way, one of the ones that walks the earth and have the full consciousness capacity, then we also have the understanding of what our true powers are and what we can and cannot do with these powers. Some have more expanded because they work through more pillars, aka activated more strands of their consciousness potentials or their consciousness genetics, and others have fewer, and with that we are grateful and appreciative of what we have, and are not having this kind of moment where we regret or get angry of that we don't have more. That's desire, that's greed. We cannot have greed when we talk about these sciences. If we go into a state of greed and we want more and we want powers and we want to do this and that, whatever, because then we can do this and that and whatever, then we are treading on the path of regression, and that is engineered by the soul dynamics of greed and gain and having and taking and reaching out for something that is of selfish purpose instead of stretching out the hand in a giving gesture, as you're always seeing the Christ symbolized with hands stretched out in giving, flat hands giving instead of hands grabbing. So that's part of the understanding of the true nature of our higher order abilities, that we give. We don't give to get. We give because it's a natural flow. We are the forces. We are the, what is the saying? We are the waters of life. We give so that others can grow. And that's what we do. And yes, I have been doing that for a long time, and I am tired of giving, and there is no fair exchange rate. So in that way, I have become imbalanced. Not because I have become greedy, but I have become imbalanced because I've given more than I have received. And in that, I must create that balance where I once again feel the ability to give, because there is a reciprocity rate. Because if you give and nothing returns, then that creates imbalance as well. It's like the sun that keeps giving energies and nothing to receive it. Eventually it will burn out. And so goes with the higher order energies as well. If something is giving and it's not received, then it either fizzles out into nothingness, or it returns with the lack of receiving, and then there's a feedback loop that is not amplifying either the receiver or the giver, and by that leads to more distortion. So we must give in a balanced way, we must create in a balanced way, and we must understand the limitations of the reality we are part of. It's not about what we want to create, it's about what's possible to create and what is needed to create, so that we may maintain the configuration that leads us to the gate out of this system. So we co-create to maintain our original holographic energetic structure as part of a balance where we give, but we are also aware of the ability to only give what can be received and not give more than what is absolutely necessary to keep the balance. These are some of the natural laws of energy. They are like a stream. They flow from one state into another. That's what energy is supposed to do. We have that in the thermodynamics as well. If it's not received, then what once was balance, what once was harmony, and if it's not received on the same level as it's given, then it will either instigate a transformative process that for some can be beneficial, for others can be detrimental, all depending on what program they're under. It can lead to transmutive processes that typically goes with the mind and the radiation level and the code streams. And if people are ready to receive that, then that can amplify in the system. But if they are not, then it leads to the opposite, larger amount of darkness and inverted dynamics due to the polarity forces. So we're up against some pretty strong understandings of the laws of giving and taking and adding and amplifying. We can't just give an amplify of due to what we feel would be the right amount because we want to be good and feel good because we've given so much. We must understand what is at the receiving end so that the balance of the cross that we are within will work its correct way. If we give a lot to people who are on the stagnant cross, there will be a rejection. If we give to the ones that are on the transformative cross, there can be instigated a transformation, but it must go under the law of reciprocity, and that way what is given must only be given to what extent it can be received. If everything goes beyond that, then the receiving end will go into a process that he or she has not asked for, and by that we are then becoming what we call the imposers of a transformational process they have not asked for, and in that way we are then doing something against that person's own free will or capacity, and we must respect that too, only to give what is absolutely in alignment with the balance point between the receiver and the giver. And then there is the transformation and transmutation, which can be given in sciences and symbols, and that's why it's always been given that way as part of the occult sciences, because you can't technically give the flame laders or the code sequences, but you can make illustrations of the processes that the ones that are then looking at it can then instigate that into contemplation processes where these symbols might activate a faint memory of an original configuration of the flame letters and or the code sequences and how they are supposed to activate the radiation field to give the ability to integrate the higher order sciences from the fifth dimension, which goes with the true sciences of reality and what reality actually is, aka enlightenment. Okay, so we are in these understandings that it's not just about what we want, it's about what is possible. So that's the first most important step when we're talking about the natural laws of energy utilization. You see, the beauty of these minutes I've been talking here is technically that's the law of energetic influence. It's also a little bit into law number 2 and law number 3 and law number 4 and law number 5. And then there are the higher laws that goes with from 6 up to 12. And that's the understanding that we could say on an individual level that goes to law number 5, it goes to principle number 5, and it goes to the rules of engagement number 5. And that's why I put them together in the Trinity structures in the template and transition sciences. We are in that, I cannot stress this enough, the best way to go around this, first and foremost, when we are in the subsidiary timeline, we are in a very strict rule set. There's not much freedom left. And as I said, again, that some of the humanoids and some of the ones that were part of the rebellions during the times of Atlantis, they are not eager or keen on the law and harmony and the way that things are ordered within these restrictive utilization and rules of engagement, as well as principles from where we build up our holographic-energetic architecture. There are always other places to go. There are other code streams where more freedom can be granted and where more experiment to transform and transmute and transcend can be experienced. And that was part of the foundation that created the less progressive universal structure. However, we have seen as part of the less regressive, so to speak, less progressive universal structure, more regressed universal structure, that most of the civilizations here, due to that high degree of freedom and autonomy in working with different forms of energies, led to the timeline event, including the complete disaster of this project altogether. It has failed from A to Z. So more freedom is not necessarily the answer to greater harmony. And that should also be recognized. However, limitations, as in scooping away, as in limitations that are taking away our abilities to work with the natural laws and harmony and order of our reality field, is not the solution either. For me, as part of the progressive universal structure as well, being part of that and remembering that I'm not connected to it anymore, but I remember what it was, it's part of my system. Well, then it's natural to work within the different laws of each dimensional level of the reality field, because that's the best way to progress. It's like if you want to learn to bicycle, there's a specific way that works. You can, of course, say, no, I want to do it my way. I want to sit upside down, or I want to have my feet on the handle and my hands on the saddle, and I want to stand upside down and do the biking. Yes, of course, you can do that if you want to, but it's not really conducive due to the way that reality is engineered. Or you can say, no, I want to drive in my car. I want to drive backwards all the way. Yeah, that's possible, but it's not necessarily the most optimal way of driving a car, and onward and so forth. The same goes with the laws. So the laws of natural utilization is that understanding. Yes, it puts limitations to what you cannot do. Technically, you can break them and you can do whatever you want to do, but there is a reciprocity rate that must be paid. It creates distortion. When you're using it against the main stream or the code stream and how it is engineered to move from less to more and progress and evolve and transform and transmute and transcend, and you're trying to go against that, it's like going against a flood. You can go so far, but eventually it will flush you out and to a lesser state of existence, sometimes our untimely demise that is of no use whatsoever. So instead of trying to do the impossible, why not just accept the laws and the rules and principles of what is in that reality that we are working with? And that's my angle of things. That's the path that makes everything so much more harmonious when you work in coherence and in alignment with the reality you're actually part of, understanding what it can and cannot do. That's the true sciences of reality dynamics, where you understand what that is. And instead of trying to break the laws, you're actually trying to support and uphold the laws for a larger amount of progression that will then lead to an extended version into complex information systems of the code sequences that will then begin to align in new ways within that code stream that allows for the others that will come after to build more complex information systems and progress in manners that will lead to a higher advancement than the ones that went first. You see, the ones that go first, they always go up against resistance and have to create the basic foundation, and they achieve a little amount. The ones that come after, if they're following the guidelines of the ones that went first, if it was done the proper way, they could technically, by the laws of complexity and amplification, become even more. And the third group will become even more, and so forth. But systems like ours that are regressing, it works the opposite way. The first one were the highest level, and the ones that came after were even less, and onward and so forth, fizzling out, dripping out, being pushed out into the outer domain where there is little to none wiggle room, where the laws are very rigid, where the cross of reality is so stagnant that we can barely do anything other than just working internally to rebuild what we have lost. And that's why we're here, because we didn't respect the laws and the rules of the original dimensions we came from. And that's part of the less progressive universal structure at its get-go, as I talk about in the Source of Humanity. The very invention of it was a bad idea and shouldn't have been allowed, but it was done so due as an experimentation that then turned out to be a pointless experimentation. Other than we can say the other civilizations that have moved on, they have looked at that and said, we are never going to do that again whatsoever. That has been tried and that has been played out, and we've done everything we could within that type of dynamics where there is more freedom and less harmony and balance, gives grounds for more options and possibilities to evolve and progress, as you know, from the internal strive, and see what that led to. And as I also say, as I said already back then, I prefer the balance and harmony. I don't mind For me, it's about doing what is necessary and what must be done, and do it in a manner that is in alignment with the different features of the world that I'm part of. I have no need to go beyond that. I have no need to break the laws and the rules and the principles. I have no need to break free and prove something else if it leads me to some kind of weird sector in the universe that is so far from everything that originally was born from the core of all of our existences. I don't see any point in doing that. This has been mimicked in the ones that emanate from source and then gets so far away from source that they no longer can reconnect. And the only way to reconnect is to reconnect to our soul. And from our soul, we can then reconnect to the foundation of the source of our origin. And as you know, that source is a major consciousness field that divided into different lineages. But that is so far back, and we don't need to go that far back. We just need to go back to who and what we were when we entered into this universal structure. Remember, it's artificial. We are so much more beyond. Once you get beyond that, you are in contact with everything there is, including the consciousness field we all were spawned from, because it's part of you. So there's no return to source. You are the source. You're the one that leads the path. You are the water of life. You are the giver of givers. You are the ones that permeates the truth of all realities through your very core and your very essence and everything that you can become. There is no creator. You are the creator. There is no God. You are the one that administered all of your potentials. But they are governed by different types of laws, they are governed by different types of principles, and they are governed by different types of rules of engagement so that we can coexist with others, so that we can progress in our holographic energetic architecture, so that we can transform the energies of the reality we are part of. And we remember the Trinity in the outer domain: transform, transmute, transcend. That's always what it is. You can, of course, put the foreleg in, so you have transition. Transition to transform, transform to transition, or transition to transmute, or transform, transition, transmute. And once you have done that several times, you will then begin to transmute. And then once you transmute, you will learn to do that, you will eventually transcend. And then there'll be no more transformation, because then you have transcended and then you're doing another transition. So you can use that Trinity quadruple kind of four-legged version of reality as well, if you like. There are different ways you can combine these understandings and these words and these dynamics in the understanding of what we're working with. So you now have the different forces, you now have the different consciousness potentials, and now you have the different dynamics. The dynamics: transition, transformation, transmutation, transcendence, which are the T's, which are kind of what we call transformative dynamics. And then you have the strands that goes with the principles, that goes with the sticks, as we talked about, becoming the cup of the higher order awareness, the true knowledge that comes from your consciousness potentials, that devolves through different dimensional levels and reality settings that are often symbolized in different forms of structures and symbols and iconography or relics or reliefs or pictograms, or however you want to put it, that shows that the dynamics of reality and what it's made of. And with that, we have the 12 natural laws of energy utilization that are a combination of all of these forces that should lead to the highest standards, the highest purity rates, and the highest progression rate. So you understand the purity rate is all about to transform what is part of the previous cycles into their higher possibility, where they can transmute into a higher potentiality. It's all about the higher standards. So you follow the laws and the rules that are governing the dynamics and the reality you're part of, and you might as well follow that, because that's the fast track road to enlightenment. That is to follow these guidelines, because that's all they are. And then the rules of engagement that make sure that you are not causing what we call disintegration or discoherence or distortion in other living beings. Since we're coexisting in the same reality field, we might as well work with coherence and appreciation and balance and harmony, so that we ensure that whatever we come in contact with is not being harmed by our very existence and by our very actions and who and what we are, that we meet each other and we meet up on the different stages of the path as a mirroring of what we need to work with and what we can become or what we once were. And all of this is met with understanding and appreciation and inclusivity and the ability to work with what is represented as a projection of an inner outer of who and what we are. Eventually, once we've cleared out everything, we won't meet anyone. We'll just be us alone. And if we do meet anyone, then they don't affect us anymore. There's no impact. There's no interference. There's no interaction. There's no interception. There's no nothing. There's no I that goes with the interaction. It's all gone. That's when we are in true balance with who and what we truly are. So, and with that, I'm kind of, and then there are the reality dynamics themselves where we are understanding our true power as part of the creational forces that we are now embedding ourselves into and trying to learn to work with what is possible and what is not, and what the different crosses of reality enables us to do, what is allowable to do, what we have got the allowances to do inside this reality. Again, if we break the laws, there will be a reciprocity that goes with regression and distortion. If we are following the laws and the dynamics of the world we are part of, it is naturally built to build higher complexity and more levels of information that will evolve and transform larger portions of the reality we are part of. And as that happens, more can go through and reach a higher purity rate, higher standards, and a highest progression rate that is possible for all life forms in that coexisting reality we are part of. So we co-create with the reality, we co-create with the subsidiary timeline. The subsidiary timeline is there last. We have worked our way there, and then we get the last leg of what it means to be an advanced civilization on the subsidiary timeline, so that we are trained to recognize that this is the behavior that is in alignment with the original civilizations that once were and are still existing outside our artificial universal structure. So with that, I will leave you to contemplate on the 12 laws of energy, which are the law of energetic influence, the law of proximity and counterbalance, the law of creational projection and amplification, the law of correct feedback and reciprocity, the law of higher and lower order sciences, the law of the cycles, the law of cause and effect, the law of correct function and correct use of energy, the law of correct purpose and correct use of genetics, the law of correct hierarchy and emplacement, the law of correct use of technology, and the law of continuation and cyclic renewal. I suggest you take any month throughout the year, and the first 12 days you contemplate on these 12 principles. Day 1, the law of energetic influence. See what you get and write it down and remember it. Create a notebook for the processes of contemplation on the 12 natural laws of energy utilization. Keep it as your grimoire, if you like, your book of co-creation. Day 2, you work with law 2. Day 3, you work with law 3. Day 4, you work with law 4, and onward and so forth. The first 12 days in each month. And then see what comes up. As in, we are now in January 2025. So you begin on February 1st with the first law on the first day, and then you write down what comes to you and what gives you of experiences. On day 2 in February, you write that down of the proximity and counterbalance. Day 3, creational projection amplification. Day 4, correct feedback and reciprocity. Day 5, higher and lower order sciences. Day 6, the cycles. Day 7, cause and effect. Day 8, correct function and correct use of energy. Day 9, correct purpose and correct use of genetics. Day 10, correct hierarchy and placement. Day 11, correct use of technology. And day 12, continuation and cyclic renewal. And you do that each month throughout 2025. Then in another notebook, you will have the principles, as you will also apply the first 12 days when you're working with the natural laws of energy utilization. And then see how that mirrors into reality, what that does to you. What are the effects of this? What are the insights you have gotten from this? And write it down as a kind of first step of manifestation. Or you can just do first 3 months, February, March, and April. So if you've done it in 3 months, which is the number of this reality, the outer domain, it has the key number of number 3. And see what it leads to of inner and outer processes. And with that, I will end this podcast, and then we got one left to go, because I've decided in this module 2, I will make 11 podcasts. I will not make a number 12, I will only make 11, because 11 is a kind of a balance point as well. And with that, there will be harmony and balance and coherence that goes with the number 11, which, if you follow the tarot cards, is... I forgot that one. It's justice, I think it is, which again symbolizes a type of balance that is the correct use of energy and consciousness. Because this is all what we're doing here. It's not about creating stuff. It's not about earning money. It's about co-creating in a manner so that we understand that we are givers and not takers. But we give in a balanced way, that we respect the crosses and the dynamics and the laws of where we are. We respect that we can only give so much, and what we give must be given in balance. There must be a reciprocity rate that is acknowledged. The receiving end must be able to receive what we give. We don't give more than what is in alignment with what is requested. We are understanding the dynamics of the patterns and the way that they are aligning themselves with each other. We are, as part of the pentagram, aware of the 5 cycles of the elements and the pattern itself, how that must be in balance as well. Otherwise, things will get out of balance and onward and so forth. These are part of the everyday understanding before we truly can begin to co-create. At this point, I also suggest you read the text material once more and then see where you are in your understanding of that. And with this little exercise, I will end this podcast. Thank you.